I was seated next to the garbage at my sister's luxury wedding, told I simply didn't fit the picture. But what they didn't know was that I held a secret that could shatter their perfect world. I never wanted to use it until they forced my hand. This is the story of the quiet envelope I left behind, and how the dignified walk away is the most powerful revenge of all. My name is Evelyn Carter, and I'm 38 years old. For most of my life, I have been a professional background character. My existence was designed to be quiet, reliable, and most importantly, non-disruptive. I learned the rules of our family early. Love was a currency, and Madeline, my younger sister, was the bank where it was all deposited. She was the star, the dream, the golden child. I was the stagehand, expected to keep the lights on without ever expecting a bow. So when I received the lavish cream-colored invitation to Madeline's wedding to Daniel Wright at the exclusive Lakeside Grand in Ashford, Maine, I did what I always did. I accepted my role. I bought a dress. A deep wine-colored wrap dress that was elegant but wouldn't outshine the bride. I spent 3 nights painstakingly wrapping their gift, a beautiful set of crystal decanters I knew Daniel collected. I practiced my smile in the mirror, the one that said, "I'm happy for you," and not, "Why does being near you always make me feel so small?" I drove the 4 hours alone. My only company, the hum of the tires on asphalt and the quiet anxiety in my chest. Before I dive deeper into this story, please take a moment to subscribe, like, and share it. Your support truly helps me bring more emotional and unforgettable stories to life. I always love hearing from you. So tell me in the comments what part of a family gathering makes you feel the most unseen. Your words and reactions inspire me more than you can imagine. And when we finally reach the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. I read every single one and it means a lot to me. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The Lakeside Grand was exactly as I'd pictured. All gleaming wood, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a serene lake, and an air of expensive calm. I could see the ballroom from the lobby, a vision of twinkling fairy lights, white orchids, and round tables draped in silver linens. My parents, Robert and Elaine Carter, were already there, my mother adjusting the bodice of her sequined gown, my father beaming beside Daniel's proud parents. Everyone looked polished and happy. A picture-perfect scene I was about to step into. I handed my coat to the attendant and moved toward the ballroom entrance, the wrapped gift heavy in my hands. That's when a young woman in a black staff uniform intercepted me with a polite, tight smile. "Miss Carter," she said, her voice low. "If you'd come with me, please." Confused, I followed her, assuming there was some issue with my seating card. But she didn't lead me into the ballroom. She turned away from the music and the laughter, down a narrower, cooler corridor lined with closed doors labeled staff only and utilities. The sounds of celebration grew muffled, replaced by the distant clatter of pans and the hum of industrial refrigeration. At the end of the hall, tucked into an alcove beside a large gray refuse bin and a stack of folded linen carts, was a single small folding table. On it was a placard that simply read, "Reserved." There was one chair. "The family requested a quiet space for you," the staff member said, unable to meet my eyes. "They said you might prefer it away from the crowd." The words didn't land like a slap. They landed like a stone, sinking straight through my chest, pulling all the air and warmth down with them. I looked from the sad little table, with its clear view of the swinging kitchen doors, back down the hall toward the sliver of golden light spilling from the main event. My family had not forgotten to seat me. They had deliberately placed me here, out of sight, where I wouldn't spoil the view. My face burned, but my hands were ice cold. I simply nodded, unable to speak. The staff girl scurried away, relief in her footsteps. I stood there for a long moment, then slowly, mechanically, pulled out the cold metal chair and sat down. The noise from the kitchen was a jarring soundtrack to the silent movie of my sister's wedding I could now only watch in fragments. Through the occasionally propped open door to the ballroom, I had a cinematic sliver of the celebration. I saw my father giving a toast, his arm around Madeline, his laughter booming. I saw my mother dabbing her eyes, smiling at Daniel. I saw Madeline herself, a vision in silk and lace, glowing under the spotlight, dancing with her new husband. Every smile, every clap, every shared glance was a tiny, precise cut. They were all in there, a complete circle. And I was out here with the discarded napkins and the extra chairs. This was my role. The afterthought. The inconvenient truth tucked in a hallway. I felt a familiar numbness spread through me, the old survival tactic kicking in. Don't feel it. Just get through it. Be invisible. I focused on the pattern of the linoleum floor. It was during the cake cutting that she finally came. The kitchen door swung shut, muting the cheers, and there she was. Madeline. My sister. Her white dress seemed to glow even in the dim hallway, making the space feel even shabbier. She looked like a princess who'd wandered into a service tunnel. She didn't look embarrassed or apologetic. She looked practical. Evelyn, she said, her voice sweet, carrying the faint champagne bubbles of her many toasts. I'm glad they found you a spot. So chaotic in there, honestly. You're probably more comfortable here, right? You always hated big crowds. I just looked at her perfect makeup, her serene expression. I waited for the punchline, for the just kidding, for the invitation to finally come in. It didn't come. She smoothed her skirt, a small impatient gesture. Look, it's just Daniel's business partners, the investors, they're all here. Mom and Dad said it would be better if, well, you know how you get sometimes. A bit quiet. It might send the wrong signal. We just wanted everything to be perfect. I found my voice, but it was a stranger's, thin and far away. You put me next to the trash, Maddie. She waved a hand, a tiny flick of dismissal. Don't be so dramatic. It's a private table. Think of the peace and quiet. She leaned in slightly, her smile never wavering, and she said the words that would change everything. They weren't shouted. They were delivered with the calm certainty of someone stating the weather. Some people just don't fit into the picture, Evelyn. Some people just don't matter as much on a day like today. You understand, don't you? It's not personal. Some people just don't matter. The words didn't hurt. They unlocked something. A final heavy door in a long dark corridor of my heart swung open, and a cold clear light flooded in. The numbness shattered. In its place was a crystalline piercing clarity. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness anymore. It was the pure undiluted truth, staring back at me from my sister's beautiful empty eyes. She smiled again, patted my shoulder as if consoling a slightly dim child, and turned to float back to her party. The kitchen door swallowed her, and the music swelled once more. I sat there in the echoing silence of her words. Some people just don't matter. And I knew with absolute certainty that she was wrong. Because 8 weeks ago, while dropping off some of my mother's misplaced mail at Madeline's sleek uptown condo, I had seen something. Madeline had dashed out to an urgent spa appointment, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen island. A chat window was flashing. It was from Daniel, but not the Daniel I knew. The messages were cold, strategic. They spoke of timing the merger announcement with the wedding for maximum PR, of securing the Carter family connections before the quarterly reports, of how my parents' social standing would solidify his board position. One line from Madeline to a friend blinked on the screen before it went dark. Love is a strategy, honey, and I'm playing to win. I had stood frozen in her kitchen, my world tilting. I'd closed the laptop, my hands trembling. I told no one. What was the point? They'd never believe me. Madeline would spin a story, my parents would choose her side, and I'd be labeled jealous, unstable, trying to ruin her happiness. So I buried it. I wrapped the secret in layers of my own silence, just like I wrapped their wedding gift. I decided to carry it to my grave, another burden of my invisibility. But as I sat at that folding table in the hallway, the smell of garbage faint in the air, her words ringing in my ears, that secret didn't feel like a burden anymore. Felt like a key to a door I was finally ready to walk through. I stood up. My legs were steady. My hands did not shake. I felt a profound, unsettling calm. I picked up the beautifully wrapped box containing the crystal decanters. I didn't throw it. I didn't smash it. I carried it with a new quiet purpose, back down the hallway toward the lobby. In the quiet, elegant ladies' lounge, away from all eyes, I carefully untied the silver ribbon. I opened the box. Nestled in the tissue paper beside the glittering decanters was a plain, legal-sized envelope I had packed at the last minute, a paranoid, buried part of me whispering just in case. I had never truly believed I would use it. I took the envelope out. It was thick. Inside were printouts, screenshots of those damning conversations I had, with a shaking hand, captured on my phone that day in her kitchen. A timeline I had secretly compiled, cross-referencing Daniel's company merger dates with their whirlwind engagement. Notes in my own handwriting, connecting the dots between his sudden interest in my father's golf club memberships and his upcoming board vote. I looked at the beautiful, useless decanters, symbols of a lie. I closed the box, but I did not retie the ribbon. I left it slightly open, and I placed the heavy, plain envelope right on top, where it would be the first thing seen when the lid was lifted. Then I walked back into the corridor. The reception was in full swing now, the music louder, the laughter looser. No one noticed the woman in the burgundy dress slipping past the edge of the dance floor, a gift box in her hands. The head table was a spectacle of flowers and champagne flutes. Madeline's beaded clutch was there, Daniel's phone next to his plate, my parents' chairs empty as they mingled. I set my gift down, not at the edge with the others, but right in the center of the table, between Madeline's and Daniel's place settings. It looked deliberate, consequential. I adjusted it once so the envelope faced the groom's seat. I did not look for my parents. I did not seek out Madeline. I simply turned and walked away. I walked past the dancers, past the smiling guests, out through the grand lobby, and into the cool night air by the lake. I didn't run. I walked with a dignity I had never felt before. I was not fleeing. I was departing. In my car, I didn't start the engine immediately. I rolled down the window, letting the cold, pine-scented air wash over my hot face. I could still hear the faint thump of the bass from the ballroom. I watched the moon paint a silver path across the black water. And then the music stopped. Didn't fade. It cut off. Mid-song. One moment it was a pulsing beat. The next, there was nothing but the sound of the wind in the trees. A strange, heavy silence poured from the building. It lasted for 10 seconds. 20. Then it was broken not by music, but by a voice raised in shock. Too distorted by distance to be words, just raw emotional noise. Then another. Commotion. And then piercing through the quiet night, clear and sharp as broken glass, came a scream. A raw, unfiltered, animal sound of utter devastation. It was a sound that held no glory, no victory, only pure unraveling shock. I knew it was Madeline. I didn't smile. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a deep, cavernous release, as if a chain I'd been carrying since childhood had finally audibly snapped. The truth was no longer mine to carry alone. It was in the light now, sitting on a table amid wilting flowers and half-drunk champagne, doing its own terrible, necessary work. I started the car. As I drove slowly away from the lakeside Grand, the rearview mirror showed the lit-up windows of the ballroom. The scene inside was no longer one of unified celebration. Shadows moved rapidly, chaotically. Figures clashed and separated. The perfect picture was cracking, and from this distance I could finally see it for the illusion it always was. I drove toward the main road, my phone lighting up on the passenger seat. First one call, then another, then a stream of them. My mother, my father, Madeline, unknown numbers. The screen flashed like a distress beacon in the dark car. I didn't reach for it. I just drove, the sound of the tires on the road a peaceful, steady rhythm. For the first time in my life, the silence around me felt like my own. Felt like freedom. The phone finally stopped ringing about 30 minutes into the drive north. The silence that followed was thicker than the darkness outside my car windows. It wasn't an empty silence. It was heavy with everything that was happening back in that ballroom. All the questions, the accusations, the frantic explanations that would now be falling on disbelieving ears. I imagined my mother's perfectly made-up face crumbling, my father's booming voice reduced to confused sputters. I imagined Daniel's cold, calculated mask slipping into panic. And Madeline. I could still hear that scream echoing in the space between my ears. It wasn't a sound of sorrow, but of a plan violently unraveling. An empire of lies feeling its first fatal tremor. I didn't feel joy. What filled the car, what filled me, was a profound and weary stillness. It was the quiet after a storm you've spent your whole life waiting for. Too exhausted to cheer, just grateful for the calm. I watched the white lines on the highway disappear under my headlights, a steady, hypnotic rhythm. I was driving on autopilot, but my mind was painfully, beautifully clear. For the first time, I wasn't replaying a conversation where I'd said the wrong thing, or worrying about how to make myself smaller. I was thinking about where I was going. The coastal retreat I'd booked on a whim weeks ago, in a moment of late-night despair, wasn't just a place. It was a promise I'd made to a version of myself I wasn't sure I'd ever meet. A tiny, weathered cabin called the Lookout, perched on cliffs north of Acadia, owned by an elderly painter who rented it out for silence. The confirmation email was still on my phone. "Welcome, Evelyn. The key is under the blue stone. The view is yours." My phone lit up again, not with a call but with a torrent of text messages. The screen cast a frantic glow on the passenger seat. "Mom. Evelyn, where are you? Something terrible has happened. Call me now. Dad. Come back this instant. We need to sort this out. What did you do? Madeline. You pathetic jealous witch. You've ruined everything. I will make you pay for this. Unknown number. Daniel's phone. I presumed you have no idea what you've interfered with. This is legally actionable. We will be in touch." Then, a new one from my mother, her tone shifting from command to something resembling pleading. "Mom, please, Evie. Please call me. He's left. He took the envelope and just walked out. Madeline is hysterical. The guests are whispering. People are leaving. Please. We're your family." I read that last one twice. Evie. She hadn't called me that since I was a little girl, before Madeline was old enough to become the sun in our family's solar system. It was a name from a time when I might have still believed I had a place. It didn't tug at my heart. It just felt like a relic, a fossil from a buried past. I turned the screen face down. They weren't calling because they missed me, or because they'd suddenly seen the error of their ways. They were calling because the scene was chaotic and I was the only one who knew the script. I was the stagehand who had, inexplicably, set off a smoke bomb in the middle of the leading lady's solo. They needed me to come back and clean up the mess, to explain myself, to apologize, to somehow make the narrative fit their world again. To be the scapegoat for the collapse of Madeline's perfect illusion. But I was done editing my truth to fit their story. I drove through the night, the landscape growing wilder, the towns fewer and farther between. The crisp, salt-tinged air of the coast began to mix with the pine. Just before dawn, with a pale gray light bleeding into the sky, I found the narrow, winding gravel road marked by a simple wooden sign. The Lookout, private. The cabin was exactly as pictured. Small, shingled with weathered gray cedar, with a wall of windows facing the endless dark Atlantic. A single, defiant light on a distant buoy winked in the blackness. I found the key under the blue stone. The door opened with a creak into a single open room. It was simply furnished. A worn sofa, a wood stove, a small kitchenette, and a large bed facing the windows. The air smelled of old books, salt, and wood smoke. It was utterly, completely silent, save for the distant rhythmic crash of waves on rocks far below. I dropped my bag by the door and walked to the window. As the dawn slowly unveiled the world, I watched the ocean. It was vast, uncaring, powerful in its constancy. It didn't care about wedding scandals or family dynasties or conditional love. It just was. I stood there until the sun fully rose, painting the water in streaks of gold and iron gray, and I felt the last tight knot in my shoulders begin to loosen. I slept for most of the day, a deep, dreamless sleep devoid of hallways or folding chairs. When I woke, the afternoon light was slanted and warm. My phone, which I had finally turned off, lay silent on the nightstand. The world had not ended. I had simply left it. Over the next few days, the outside world tried to reach in. I turned my phone on once a day, just for an hour, to a symphony of notifications. The texts became more desperate, then angry, then finally sputtered into a kind of bewildered silence. "Madeline, he called off the merger. His parents won't take my calls. The wedding is all anyone is talking about. Are you happy now? Dad, your mother isn't well. The stress of this, the embarrassment. You need to come home and fix this. Mom, we saw the printouts, Evelyn. How could you spy on your sister? How could you ambush her like this? Was this your plan all along?" That one did sting. The blame, so swift and absolute, was still a reflex I had to unlearn. I wrote a single reply to all of them and then blocked their numbers for a while. I needed the air to clear in every sense. I didn't plan anything. I just stopped hiding the truth you all chose not to see. I am not coming back to fix this. It was broken long before I left that envelope. I hope one day you can see that too. Leave me alone. The news, of course, trickled out. A few days later, sipping coffee at the small cabin table, I opened a browser on my laptop. A society column in the main chronicle had a small biting piece. Wright-Carter nuptials end in unexpected drama. It was vague, citing a serious last-minute revelation regarding the union's foundation that led to the amicable but immediate postponement of matrimonial plans. It mentioned the groom, Daniel Wright, had departed the venue alone, and that his company, Wright Holdings, had issued a terse statement about focusing on business interests apart from personal matters. The article ended with, "The Carter family could not be reached for comment. Amicable. Postponement." The polite language of society was so good at dressing a corpse in fine clothes. I closed the laptop. That chapter was over. The real work began in the quiet of that cabin. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and internal. I walked the cliff paths every day, the wind whipping my hair, the vastness of the ocean putting my small, long-held pain into perspective. I cooked simple meals. I read books I'd always meant to read. I sat for hours just watching the light change on the water. I began to write, not for anyone to see, but just to untangle the threads of my own life. I wrote about the little girl who learned to whisper. I wrote about the sister who was never quite enough. I wrote about the woman in the burgundy dress who finally, quietly, said no more. One evening, about 3 weeks after the wedding I got an email. It was from my father's personal address, not my mother's. "Evelyn, your mother is staying with her sister for a while. Madeline has gone abroad, supposedly to reset. I am alone in this big, quiet house. I found an old box of photos in the attic. There were so many of you. You building a sandcastle with such intense focus. You winning the 5th grade science fair. You holding Madeline the day she came home from the hospital, looking at her like she was the most fascinating thing you'd ever seen. I had forgotten. I think we all forgot to look at you after a while. It was easier to see the noise Madeline made than the quiet person you were becoming. I am not making excuses. There are none. What we did to you at that wedding, what we've done for years, it was cruel. I saw the printouts. I had a private investigator look into Daniel's dealings after you left. It was all true. Every cold, calculated word. We were so eager for Madeline to have this perfect life. We were willing to be pawns in it. We were blind. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't know if I can forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I see you now, Evelyn. However late it is, I see you. If you ever want to talk, I am here. No conditions. Love, Dad." I read it with tears streaming down my face, silent ones that felt like a release of poison. They weren't tears of reconciliation, not yet. They were tears of acknowledgement. For the first time, a member of my family had looked at the truth, had said its name, and had not blamed me for holding it up to the light. It didn't fix the past. It didn't instantly heal the wound. But it was a start. A single fragile thread thrown across a great divide. I didn't reply that day or the next. I let the words settle. I needed to be sure my own foundation was solid before I tested any new bridges. A month turned into 2 at the lookout. I extended my stay indefinitely. Using a small inheritance from my grandmother I'd always been too cautious to touch, I began making quiet plans. I wasn't going back to my old life, my old job, my old city. The invisible woman was gone. I wasn't sure who was emerging yet, but she was someone who valued peace, truth, and her own company. On my last morning at the cabin, I stood at the cliff's edge one final time. The ocean was calm, a deep, steady blue. I thought about Madeline's scream, that sound of a world ending. I realized now that it wasn't her world ending. It was the false one she'd constructed, the one I had been forced to live in the shadow of. I didn't leave to punish anyone. I left because I finally understood that being unseen is not the same as being unworthy. My revenge was not in the chaos I left behind, but in the peace I walked toward. It was in choosing myself. It was in the profound dignity of silence that is chosen, not imposed. The most powerful justice was not in their downfall but in my awakening. In reclaiming my own story word by quiet word. I got in my car, the cabin key left under the blue stone for the next soul-seeking solace. I didn't drive back toward my old life. I drove south toward a new coast, a smaller town, and a quiet cottage I'd rented sight unseen. The future was an open road, and for the first time I was in the driver's seat, with no one to tell me to get out of the way. Thank you for listening till the very end. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe for more stories like this. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 in the comments. Your words and reactions inspire me more than you can imagine.